I see we have folks from all over the world joining. It's actually pretty early here in California, but all in all, I'm really excited to dive into portfolios and case studies. Um, so that'll be sort of the theme today, and we're going to go over quite a bit. Um, we're not necessarily going to get a ton of uh, design advice per se, but it's more or less around how you can structure and tips to be more effective. Let me go ahead and share our deck here. So my clicker is out, so uh, you might hear a little bit of my mouse click as I'm starting to go through. Let me get this all set up so we're good to go and I can see your chat. Um, so as I mentioned before, we're going to be going over a number of different things in regards to your case study. And so the agenda is as follows. I'm going to kind of start off with an introduction. We'll go through case study tips, how to structure a case study, how to refine your case study, and ultimately how you can get yourself out there, right? Because you don't want to put in all this hard work and not make it count. So we'll start with an introduction. My name is Harrison Wheeler. As Jesse mentioned, I work at LinkedIn. And at LinkedIn, I'm a design manager of around 7 designers and managers. And we work on a wide suite of products on one of our enterprise products called Marketing Solutions. It's actually one of our fastest growing lines of business at the company. So we've seen a lot of growth within the last 3 years. With that, before that, I was working at a company called Base CRM, which was eventually acquired by Zendesk back in 2018. And there I actually built the design team, started recruiting pipeline, managed designers and really helped them move on to success while also getting hands-on and rolling my sleeves up as well. And then sort of a third piece, I also do quite a bit of mentoring with amazing design people list. And so I've had the opportunity of mentoring over 50 designers. And one of the things that we talk about is this quite a bit, right? And so I'm excited to really share a lot of those stories and highlights into this presentation. So I know, folks in the top coder community come from a wide array of different backgrounds, whether you're working in-house at an agency or freelancing. And myself, I've done quite a bit of freelancing when I first started out in my career. And so, I think the move to case studies, I think now sort of consolidates some of the ways that, recruiters and managers are looking at potential candidates, right? And I want to share some of those things with you all today. So there are really 2 main goals that I would like for you all to get out of this. So for one, your tips to help improve your existing portfolio. So for those folks that already have one, how can we improve on that? And then we want to make it cohesive, right? Because it's actually all about storytelling. It's how you can put your best self out there. Because remember, your portfolio and your web presence, a lot of times is actually going to be the first time that people are interacting with you, right? So how can we operate in this, have a representation in this digital space? So what is a case study, right? So this is this is the Webster's dictionary definition, right? So it's a record of research that details sort of your considerations throughout that process, right? And usually the strongest case studies are, they're gonna obviously have the solution, but you're also going into sort of some of the generative methods, right? Your foundational methods, and then also adding your qualitative, quantitative analysis in terms of the outcome of it, right? So we're not going to get in detail into all of that. But I think it's important because you want to put your best self forward, right? It's your first impression and opportunity to communicate how you work within the constraints of your problem space. And so this is my definition. Because really operating under those constraints actually takes more of the pressure outside of the final product. A lot of times, us as designers, we get super focused on sort of the final output and the polish, when it's actually more about the process and how you got there. Okay, so how many of you all, and you can answer in the chat, how many of you all have been working on your case study? And as you're going on, you're not sure how things really kind of come together, right? And ultimately you hit the ground running But by the time you kind of get to the end of that case study, it's like you're struggling to cross the finish line. Can we get some hands in there? Does that happen to you all? I know I've seen it quite a bit. So, you know, you guys are pretty shy this morning. Uh, but basically, it's when your case study starts strong but struggles to cross the finish line. And here's some symptoms of those sort of things, right? And here's some diagnosis. So for one, poor connection of process. There might be a bevy of images with no descriptions. There's some uncertainty in terms of how you think about the actual portfolio or case study itself. There's no description of the process. There's incomplete explanations. Ultimately, maybe not even a conclusion. And there's a lack of why, right? And so I know I felt some of these things at some points early in my career. And if you're feeling some of these, that's likely part of the issue, right? So how should you structure it? So this is pretty simple stuff, right? I think going into your case studies, it can be sort of intimidating because it's like, okay, you see something on this website, and you go to another designer and they're doing something completely different, or then someone has a template and then it's just not working out for you, right? But I think a good way to think about structuring it is really thinking about the 5 W's, right? You've heard these before: the where, when, what, who, and why. I've kind of ordered these a little bit differently for you. And what I'll do, I'll actually explain how this might fit into this, all right? So when it comes to where, right, just simply where you at in your process. When it comes to the when in your project did you conduct these methods, right? And then what methods did you choose to help drive more clarity and focus? Who was involved in this stage of the process? So sometimes you actually might be working, with another designer, you might be working with an engineer, you might be working with research participants. Make sure that you're really highlighting those folks. And additionally, why? Like, why did you feel these methods were the best to help you achieve more clarity? The why here is so important because that's actually going to be more or less your personality shining through. It's a part of your design ethos. So make sure in each section that you're really highlighting these things. And there's one more bonus. Can you all guess? I will give you 5 seconds. I can't see your faces, but if you can type in the chat, what do you think is the extra thing to add to your case study? If there are no answers, I will go ahead. It's pretty easy. It's the how. It's the how. Dara, almost, but it's the how. A lot of folks are really good at this piece, right? You go through case studies, the how, right? It's maybe I did an affinity map and I have a picture of my affinity map, or, here's a survey and here are the questions that I put in my survey, right? That's more or less the how. So we do a really good job at that. But again, we want to make sure that we're building that story around the how. So how does this all appear in your case study? So one of the things I've been talking about quite a bit is the sections, right? And what I mean by sections is more or less thinking about the product development lifecycle, right? And I'm sure you all are familiar with it. Today, we'll only go through 4 of those pieces. But when we think about the product development lifecycle, we're thinking about the introduction, right? So forming your problem statement, going into research, prototyping, and validation, all right? So when we talk about the 5 Whys and the 1 H, we'll be thinking about those on a per sort of section basis. And what I've kind of done here, I'm actually going to walk you through in terms of what that can look like. One of the tips that I generally will tell folks is to actually write out their case study before actually adding images to it, right? The images are additive, right? What you want to have is that sort of cohesive story. So in these examples that I provide, we won't have all the 5 Whys and the H, but you'll kind of get a gist of how those things can be applied here. So let's say I'm working in Google Docs and I have this. So as you can see, like an introduction and problem statement, you sort of see that I'm kind of framing this in the who, what, why, and how, right? So who is the audience that this problem is solving for? What is the hypothesis around the problem statement? What is influencing your hypothesis and why? And how might you go about getting the bottom of this? All right. So ultimately, that's really going to be up to you to apply how these things are going to work in your specific areas. But you can see if you start to create this sort of framework, you also create this pattern. And pattern matching is great because you never want to assume that, because you're doing something totally different, that the reader is going to expect that, right? A lot of times the recruiting manager or your actual hiring manager, they may be working on other things and they only have, maybe a minute or two to kind of glance through things. When we get to research, right? Who's conducting the research? What methods of research are being done to help you drive more clarity and focus? Why did you use these methods, right? What are high level summaries in terms of how you do this? And what you're seeing right here for the first time is also summarizing. Summarizing is also what I like to call synthesis. So if you can actually summarize your research findings in like 3 bullet points, that's also really great because you're wrapping up each, your research section. You're also wrapping up your other sections in a way that's super, that's consistent, and in a way that people can really expect, the outcome of those things and where those will be displayed. And then when it comes to prototyping, right? So it's important, one of the caveats here that I want to add is that it's actually important to connect those previous portions of your previous stages of your design process to the next, right? So how did research inform how you're going to prototype, right? What are the solutions that you decided to work on? Why? How did research influence those things? And then additionally, how? What are the different types of generative methods that you use to go through prototyping? I think it's really important to set yourself up with those constraints. And we're going to be going on, after this section, I'm also going to go into some tips in terms of how you can even up level, this even more so there's more clarity. And then for the validation piece, right, outline what you're going to be validating, right? Why did you decide to prioritize these specific tasks or flows? And then obviously how you decide to do these things, and then obviously summarize and analysis, right? So you're starting to see that it's a really great opportunity to just get those thoughts out. And I think some folks might get a little bit sort of iffy, like, is this long enough? Is this short enough? I'll dive into that a little bit more after this, okay? So how long should it be, right? So generally these are just like 3 high level types of things, right? I personally do not think there is a set guideline as to how long or short your case study can be, right? And also this is the part that I alluded to a little bit earlier. Never assume your audience can read in between the lines. The moment you start omitting data information, it actually might actually be more detrimental to it. I can't tell you how many times I've had conversations with designers around their case studies. And as they're starting to go through the exploratory process, they tell me more in terms of a voiceover, but it's nowhere to be seen in the case study. And I guarantee you, if they actually wrote down what they were telling me in that voiceover, it would make their case study that much more compelling, right? It would help them stand out because now it's uniquely them. So you don't want to get in the habit of going into definitions. You don't want to get in the habit of just showing the how, right, without sort of bringing in and framing the why. And then also too, right, if it takes a little bit longer to set up your problem space, that's fine, right? I'm sure if you are doing a design exploration, in the area of, splunking in, Indonesia, I know nothing about that. And so if it takes you a couple more paragraphs to sort of create that or set up that foundation, go ahead and do it, because that actually is going to influence quite a bit and give me an understanding of kind of the constraints that you're thinking of, as well as the types of users and the challenges that your customers might face. All right. So this is one of my favorite parts. All right, because hopefully it'll blow your mind. But really, there's sort of this refinement piece, and so I think after you've kind of done a lot of what I initially kind of went over in terms of setting up your case study, it'll really be important to actually take another look at that, right? How can you make it better? How can you make it stand out? Where are there opportunities to really let your case study shine? All right. So this is probably one of the most important ones. Okay. Um, this means a lot to me personally. And I don't see it enough when it comes to, uh, case studies that, designers are having, especially when you're moving into the field of design or you're pivoting, um, is understanding like what are the motivations for the business, right? When I talk about design and operating in constraints, it may be time, it may be budget, and then initially, it also is going to be influenced by the goals of the business. And so, your case study shows how design plays a role into that and how it plays in that balance of also creating solutions for your users and creating value. But we don't see enough of this. And so one of the next question is how do you tie in business objective or what are these types of things, right? So I think for one it's understanding there are two things. So there's sort of a high level understanding of what's the North Star metric. So for instance, maybe I'm working on e-commerce website, and the objective obviously for an e-commerce website is to sell as many goods as possible. Okay, so that might be a general business objective. But specifically for the flows that you're working on, you need to think about what does success look like, right? And so in that e-commerce website, you may say that success actually the checkout process, success actually might look like getting people to check out in as few steps as possible, right? And that's going to inform your design to research and realize that there's a ton of drop off because there might be some additional friction that you didn't think about when you initially designed it. And so really start to tie in that business objective because that's actually going to affect a couple of things potentially. It may affect who you're actually conducting the research with. It may affect, the how you're actually going to apply the design. And then if you're doing a lot of different generative methods to create different types of concepts, it may actually help you narrow down which ones are probably going to be the most effective and create the most impact. So I talked through all of this, but we can go back to this later if you want to. The next one is prioritize one or two flows. So I kind of spoke to this very, very briefly. All right. So a lot of times when I'm looking at portfolios, there's this whole website redesign, and website redesigns are great. I think it's a great exploration in terms of testing how you can apply design at scale. All right. The only downside is that it's very, very hard to tell a story. Okay. And so I had that sort of example before in an e-commerce website, right? And so an e-commerce site might have a login, it might have a search function, you might have a profile, you might have settings, you might have a checkout, you might have a catalog. But when it comes to like a user journey, a user is actually probably going to look at these things at different phases. All right. They may not necessarily be in the same mindset. They may not necessarily be in the same environment. And so, kind of like the way that I like to say that is that even if you think about things from an experimentation level, there are just a ton of variables that are very hard to concentrate on. And so, one of the things I think is great, especially if you're looking to build up your portfolio, is maybe sort of highlight one or two important flows, right? So as I mentioned before, this case might look great in terms of building an e-commerce website to drive more revenue. However, when it comes to defining a success metric, my question to you would be, how does login play a role into that? How does settings play a role into that? How does a catalog play a role into that? You'll notice it's going to be a lot harder to tell that story. However, if we just focus on that checkout screen, it gets a lot easier, right? We can now sort of say, all right, maybe here are the 5 screens or 6 screens that we're working with, and we start to generate a flow out of it, right? So now you can start to optimize what that path is. You may say, all right, maybe I have 6 screens, maybe we'll reduce that down a little bit, but you're going to be more concentrated in terms of, the story that you're telling. And then additionally, it allows you more time to really focus on the things that matter. So really kind of consider doing those things on your case study. So this is also the sandwich technique. So I like this. I kind of alluded to this a little bit earlier, but this is generally sort of creating your transitions through each piece, right? So as I mentioned before, we did the 5 Ws along with the H. This is more or less kind of creating an introduction and a summary, right? So get in the pattern of that and really think about how the beginning and the end of each section are tying to the next section as well. That'll create more cohesiveness for you. So again, this is once you're able to kind of take that second or third pass. This is one of my favorite pieces. Going back on your case study and iterating, you should think about your portfolio in the same manner, right? Don't be afraid to go back and iterate and try new concepts and learn. And one of the things that I actually always kind of see that gets put in the afterthought is with all of the text is not highlighting the key visuals, right? I'm going to take you through maybe 3 very common and simple ways that you can start to use data visualization to really help your portfolio stand out there. So again, I kind of wrote here, not every chart or matrix is going to add value to a case study. And that is so true. You want to be additive, like I mentioned before. So if it's going to make your copy and your text be more stronger, then add it in. And really ask yourself, is this really necessary? So here are some key kind of visuals I think are great. So I kind of have 3 here. We're looking at just kind of a percentage point as well as sort of a visualization of a downtrending metric. We also have comparative bar charts, and then additionally a line graph, right? And so here's some great sort of examples that you can apply these types of visualizations to, right? So survey summarizations are great for sort of showing the percentages. I think if there's a situation where you have, and I've seen this quite a bit, when you have 70% or 80% of users that made it to completion and 20% didn't, you don't necessarily need the 20% because the user can infer that your percentile scale is likely coming from 100. So one number actually might be strong enough for you to sort of put up there, right? Additionally, when I was talking about the number of steps of purchase, I'm keeping in this shopping cart theme, if you can tell. In this example, we're looking at a checkout experience and the number of steps it takes, right? So the existing checkout experience versus the new checkout experience, or maybe looking at performance over time, right? There's some great opportunities to sort of add these into your case study. So really consider these things. There's actually a really great book. I wonder if I have it on me right now. I don't have it on me, but there is a really great book by the New York Times, or excuse me, the Wall Street Journal around, how you can look at data visualization. Also, here's another book that I've used called Visualize This. Really cool opportunities to just kind of look at high-level examples of how you can bring data data visualizations into the work that you're doing. And then this last piece, refine to shine. All right. So just because you've done a case study in the past or done a portfolio piece in the past, it doesn't mean that you can't go back and refine it, right? I'm not gonna go to your employer and sort of ask, hey, is this what you designed back in the day? So if there's something that you designed maybe 2 years ago, let's say it was using an old version of material design, feel free to update that. You can do that, right? If you learn new sort of ways to sort of craft how you visualize things, or you want to apply new typography styles to your work, go ahead and do it, right? Because design trends over time do change, right? And you want to be cognizant of that. But I think it's also an opportunity too, from an exercise perspective, to always go back at your work, because there's an opportunity too to sort of understand like how far you've made it. I think having a level of self-reflection is always great, and a case study is a really great capsule in time that encompasses all of that. All right. So always go back every 6 months and just sort of look at where is your portfolio today, and can you go back and refine anything of that. So, again, sort of with these pieces that I kind of showed you, great, great, these are great opportunities to maybe go back to your current portfolio and see if there's areas that you can improve there. All right. So you've done all of the hard work of getting your portfolio and case study out. So how do you put yourself out there? So before we get into that, I think it's actually very important to work on your 10-second pitch. The reason that I say that is that your story is ultimately going to be unique. If you want to communicate that, in your case study, right? You also want to have that as something in your back pocket once you have on-site interviews. So here's just sort of a anonymized story. I actually had a mentorship session with this woman that had a background in biochemistry. And, she was experiencing a lot of confidence issues in terms of her interviewing, right? Because of her background, she just didn't feel that she was fit to move into a design role right away. And she had everything done. She had her portfolio done, but it just really didn't stand out to her. And I don't think she was able to communicate, herself. So we'll call her Selma. And a lot of times you'll see introductions that are like, "Hello, my name is Selma, and I'm a user experience designer," right? But one of the things that we talked about was the fact that she had a scientific background, right? She worked in biochemistry. And so a lot of that is sort of framing the question, right? Framing the problem, having a hypothesis, and running tests to sort of validate that. And so I think that that's kind of one of those things that she started to work on, and it really started to shine through. Right. And so as you can sort of see this is actually more of a conversation starter, right? So she sort of transformed that into falling in love with the problem, right? As it sort of creates the best solutions. And with that, again, there's sort of hooks where you can start to have more conversations, because look, when you show up to interviewing with potential organizations, you're not just your portfolio, right? There needs to be a human connection. And so in the same way that you're explaining the why and your design ethos around your problem statements, make sure that you're also clearly communicating how you're going to how you bring yourself to the table, right? What are your motivations? Why did you get into design? And then the last piece, make sure you're accessible online. Now, I'm always going to give a shameless plug for LinkedIn. There are a ton of recruiters on LinkedIn. There are tons of people to network with in a professional space. And so you want to make sure that you're on there. So please make sure that you are linking your portfolio to your LinkedIn profile. All right. I've been on, I've seen many portfolios, or excuse me, seen many designers that actually don't link their portfolios on the LinkedIn, right? And while they might have a website, if it's not, if it's not accessible from an SEO perspective, it actually can be quite hard to find. So really think about ways that you can centralize that. Now, I will say that design community has mobilized so much during COVID-19. And so there's a ton of, mentorship circles. There's a ton of conferences that are happening for reduced fees that are free. So make sure that you're joining those things, right? Make sure that you're making those connections. I also see a lot of designers produce content on websites like Medium, as well as Dribble. So there's now a little bit more of a social media play with it. And that's just sort of where the industry is well, I shouldn't say the industry, it's not specific to design, but I would probably say a lot of industries are moving a little bit more content centric, right? So just make sure that you're a little bit, you're investing in that a little bit more. the benefit, I think, to writing and posting is that it's also great practice. As a designer, you have to be really good at communicating, and that's just not something that I believe is taught enough. um, in a lot of these circles. And so, a majority of my day, obviously, I'm a manager, but majority of my day is actually communicating with my cross-functional partners, like my engineers, product managers, data scientists, product support, and really kind of getting them on board and understanding what their perspective is. So make sure that you're really starting to get into that storytelling piece. A lot of this stuff is going to help you in practice create those storytelling so you can be more effective as well. So look, in conclusion, um, I will say this: creating great portfolios and case studies are a practice. And so what you put out there, for the first time, you'll likely have to go back and iterate. And so I think it'll give you a great opportunity to really kind of sharpen that knife, which is really necessary long term. Okay. And I think the more that you feel comfortable, I think in terms of how do you know if something is finalized and great, I think that's really up to you. If you think it is representing yourself in the best sort of light, and it's clearly communicating these concepts, you'll be at a good place, right? Don't aim for perfection. Aim more or less for if that story is complete. And then again, when it comes to the images, make sure that they are additive and creating more value to your statements as well. So that I'm wrapping up now. So feel free to connect with me on Twitter and Instagram at HNWHEELE, on LinkedIn. And then I also have a podcast that I'm running, and you can access that at gettechnical.io. We talk about a ton of things around UX. And then you can connect with me on my website as well. I didn't put this on here, but I also have a ton of content on Medium. So that wraps it up. And I guess we're going to open the floor for any questions that you all have.
Thank you. So folks, this is your chance. I've seen some chatter in there in the chat, so thanks for that. But if you have any specific questions, feel free to put it in there. Vicky, per your points in the chat, do you feel like you've gotten some good insights to improve your portfolio, and especially the metrics piece of it? I think they're slow typers today.
So it looks like there's a question from Dara. So when hiring a designer and looking at his or her portfolio, how much it matters the problem is solved versus how it's presented, thinking in percentages. That's a great question. Is this more or less around solving? So I guess how I'm interpreting this is, does your project that you're going through in your case study, does it have to be successful? And it really doesn't have to be, right? Like, part of your scientific method is about having a hypothesis and testing it. And so not every solution that you're going to have this case study and design process with is necessarily going to be successful. And that's okay, right? But the fact of the matter is that you took an intelligent risk and you went through the process to sort of understand at least what is going to put you guys in the best light in terms of getting some sort of clarity out there. All right. So anonymous attendee I'm going to answer this. Is it better in the portfolio focusing on one field of experience that based on the job? Is it better one field of experience that is based on the job description? It'd be great if you could clarify that a little bit. I will say, is this more or less, how about this? Why don't you maybe kind of clarify, is it by industry? Because ultimately design is a cross-functional, cross-functional is not the right word, but design is a multidisciplinary role, right? And so at least the way that we look at it at LinkedIn, our designers are generalists. And so they may have, they may do some work in regards to working with our researchers. They may even conduct some high-level research themselves. And that can be in the form of heuristic studies. It can be in the form of surveys, competitive analysis. Like those are very low-level kind of research methods, all the way to, prototyping, which, I think we're all familiar with, and working with, working with our members or with our users and with our cross-functional team, like our support team, to start to test those things, right? And go on to engineering and working with engineers to output that. So there's a ton of opportunity there. All right. Is there a concrete sample that you can show us exactly what you've shared? Maybe a link to a sample portfolio. So, I don't, and I actually did that on purpose. The reason that I did that, this is more or less techniques for you guys to really focus on the story piece. There's some folks that do things pretty well. I think if I was to show you one portfolio example to the next, they might be grossly different. But I would say same learning areas such as creating a portfolio for data analytics and science. Is that specifically around design, or is this like another industry? By the way, I think that is a great question, Adam, because design has traditionally been doing, I shouldn't say traditionally, I think case studies have been around the UX sort of world. I'd probably say in the last like 5 years, they've really become super prevalent. And when looking at other areas such as research specifically, because I work with researchers quite a bit, they don't really approach things in the same manner. However, I think they could actually be way more effective if you moved into that, right? So like there's nothing stopping you from kind of moving in a case study format. The tips that I provided here today, obviously I'm looking at those in the scope of design, but in any sort of scientific method or design sort of process or generative process, all of this is actually pretty concurrent for those. So I think there's a lot of parallels where you can apply some of these things in different industries.
Great questions, guys. Any other ones you guys have on top of mind? How about Fajar or Luis? I'm sure you got some burning questions out there. And I know, Vanita, you had said something about, portfolios for things outside of design as well. So hopefully that answered some of your questions too. You had mentioned that in Slack.
Yeah, I mean, if you're in industries where they're not doing a case study, I'll put it like this. If you walk, like I'll never forget the first day that I had a designer present a case study to me that was applying for a job versus sort of a traditional kind of portfolio. And my mind was like absolutely blown. And I think at that point, it was a little bit ahead of sort of where we're at today, where, it's synonymous. I think if you're in an industry that's not doing those types of things and you want to apply that to it, I guarantee you it'll catch the attention of hiring managers and recruiters.
So it sounds like I need to create some more great content for you folks on creating case studies. We'll have to add that to our educational center.
Yeah.
Any other questions, folks? We have a couple more minutes. I just want to make sure you all have a chance to chime in. Great to see so many of our great designers here and members. Last year.
Yeah. So question, what are the, where's everyone at in terms of just like their career? Do you guys have like case studies right now? Like, are you finding kind of issues around your portfolio? I just want to get like a quick kind of litmus test.
Actually have a question because at
Yeah.
our on our website Top Coder we have a number of really great case studies, and the thing that's different
Yeah.
about our case studies is that it's project based, but it's group too, right? It's not one person. So how do you differentiate that type of case study rather than one that you've done all of the work yourself? Like, can you show something
Yeah.
in the group type thing?
Yeah. That's an excellent question. I'll tell a story. Right. So these are stories of when I started a design recruiting pipeline and design process. And so one of the things that I hired a student from this college, and it had an HCI program, which is great. I think there are very few at the time. Um, and the thing is, they all do like this group capstone project. And so when he applied for the job, so did all his classmates. And so a lot of times there were a ton of, everyone had the same project. Now, I talked about this before, right? Early on, when I talked about the who piece. I think it's important to be very transparent in terms of who you're working with and the role that you play, because that actually plays a large role in terms of how you're working with people. Um, and with that being said, those workplace dynamics are also very important to talk about, right? So there might be a common question of how do you work with a team? Maybe there's a challenge around getting your ideas out. How did you collaborate together and how did you solve those? Those are great things to kind of bring out, right? And so really kind of think of the dynamics of your work, your working group, and bring those into your case study, right? Because again, that's another constraint that's unique to your problem, that I think is important, that will add another level to your case study. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yep, thank you.
All right, Victoria, this is a great question. I want to use my case studies on a project that I worked on at Top Coder. I cannot talk about real research and if my contributions have reached any objective. So I have no feedback about it. It'd be great if you could define what real, quote unquote, real research is, and if your contributions reach the objective. So that is, I think that's actually a really great statement slash question. There are ways to do it. All right. So for us, like a lot of times we may not actually be able to build some of the concepts, right, that we're doing. And a lot of the times that we're doing exploratory work. What really is going to help you become, help those things, maybe reframe those, is to think about tying like that objective. What is the success metric, right? So if there's a prompt, really kind of think about that prompt and say, okay, what would constitute success in this problem space? Because a lot of times, if you don't have that, it's going to be very hard to frame research. It's going to be really hard, even if you're not going to build it, to talk about how you would test success, how you would test if something was successful. And so there are ways to do that. Okay, so really kind of maybe go back and refine. And I don't know, like hopefully I don't get in trouble with top coder, but when it comes to when I was talking about refinement, it's okay to go back and reframe your case study and redo it in terms of just like, okay, maybe we didn't talk about success metrics today, but let me add it to it later in terms of what I think it could be. And that might change actually the whole output of your work. So just reframe it. Not all hope is lost, trust me. There are ways to really kind of think about these things and challenge yourself. Yeah, and then also to Dara's point, I would give you the same feedback, right? You should imagine how things would constitute success. That's your hypothesis, right? And so success metrics as a hypothesis is okay. You're taking an educated guess and you're going through your process to help prove that. If it's right, good job. If it's wrong, learning. It's a learning opportunity and you reiterate. That's just the name of the game. So hopefully that helped you all provide some clarity and give you a little bit more confidence. I think from just the feedback that I'm getting through in the questions in the channel, there is an opportunity for all you all to just kind of go back in your case studies and start to refine those and really kind of challenge yourself to think in a business mindset, because that's what design is. It doesn't happen in a vacuum. There's usually a marketplace side to it, right? So you're going to have a user, and then you're obviously going to have potentially, a product service that you're selling. In creating a portfolio, should we include every project we should work on, or just select the best ones? Great question. So I like to think of it like this. Let's say you have a resume. Most people like resumes that are a page long. All right. I think at this point in my career, I don't think I would put jobs that I had in high school, right? And so I think ideally, you should probably choose the most recent projects or you should choose the projects that are going to put your skills in the best light. I would imagine the reason I say I wouldn't put a job in high school, let me elaborate on that, is that, obviously if you're close to high school, you should put it, but I'm just saying there's usually a lot of growth that you want to see over time, right? So you don't want to put something so far back that doesn't communicate, your growth over time.
That's a really great point, Vicki. Get some insights about the effects of our work on the client's life. So yeah, that's a really great point. I know we've done a number of case studies. We've even done like videos with our customers showing, the amazing things that they're doing after working with Top Coder. So I would love to bring that up to our marketing team and see about how we could do that. Because I think it's really valuable for you folks to see that implementation and the success of it to help you on your way. So thank you for bringing that up. I will definitely take that to the class to share.
Yeah, and if you identify those success metrics, you can check in on that with them later, right? And I think that's really cool. So I think that's a cool opportunity there. All the things that I'm telling you right now, they're not as commonplace as you think. So I think if you guys can really start to tap into that, there's really an opportunity to sort of stand out from such a competitive crowd that there is in the business market today.
Great. Okay, folks, we're almost at time. Do you have any other questions before we call it a day? This has been a really great chat, and I hope really helpful for all of you. Really great questions, some great insight. So. Okay, so if you have any other follow-up questions, please feel free to email me. You guys should all have my contact info, and connect with Harrison as well if you'd like. I'd like to say a big thank you again to Harrison for joining us. This was really valuable for our community, and we'll have this recording up very soon so you guys can check it out if you missed anything. But thank you again. Have a great rest of your day. And
Thanks, everybody.
thanks. Bye-bye.
Take it easy. Bye.